Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another CSGO map analysis video. We're going to be looking at Kaizen by Andre Valera and Jakuza. And this was asked to be reviewed by the commenter Dylan XP300. Hope you're doing well, dude. So, as my buddy over here is eyeing the vending machine in T spawn, figure we can talk a little bit about this map and what I think about it. Now, notably, I have not been able to play any PvP games on this map. It's just been strictly bot games, but that has also allowed me to run around the map and at least understand its layout. So I'm going to point out some things that I like and some things that I think might be able to be improved, and then I think there will be a couple of things that I just flat out don't like, but we'll get to all of that. I'm not sure about starting the T's in this particular area, mostly because it feels very claustrophobic, and like you have to walk through a little portal here, a little door, just to get out access to the rest of the map. It kind of feels like I'm wondering what the point of it is, really. Because, you always want every single aspect of your map to serve a purpose. Multiple purposes, if possible, because the more one thing does, the more useful and the more it justifies its own existence, right? So, generally speaking, when you're thinking about adding an element or configuring an element, tweaking something, iterating on something, you want to make sure that whatever you're doing to something improves the map flow and, does something positive to the overall puzzle. And I'm not really sure what this piece adds besides a little bit of, perhaps you could say, it's flavor, right? It's atmosphere. Like, oh, they got here through the subway. It basically is what the subtext is, what the story is of this particular map of how the T's got here. And you'll see this in other maps too. Like if you go to Nuke, the terrorists like crashed a van in, and that's how they breached the facility or whatever. And like obviously a lot of counter terrorists just have like those SWAT vans or whatever. So there's a lot of cases where you'll see subtle tweaks like that, or subtle little visual cues as to how the T's and CTs got to the area that they're in, which sort of helps you subconsciously feel like it's a real place. For such a situation like this, I feel like maybe it might make a bit more sense to have them just a bit more open. Like you might even be able to keep this whole area, but opening up a little bit more of this region so that I can walk around it or, walk through it without having to bumble into all of my people. I just don't know if this is 100% wide enough. And even if it's like technically, on most cases it's wide enough, you kind of want to aim bigger than you might think you need, I think, when it comes to like making a passageway that's pathable by 5 people. So, I don't know, maybe it's probably a very minor point at the end of the day, but something that I thought would help to basically stop people from not knowing where to go immediately is if they were, while they're in freeze time, they can look around at all 3 options. And you can really only do that, well, I guess you can't really do that from any position inside spawn, but you can't especially do it if you're spawning in one of the back spawns. Like this is where I spawned when I spawned in, somewhere around here. And obviously I can only see one passageway from this angle, right? So I think especially for onboarding new players and for reminding veteran players, like essentially allowing them to pre-plan their route, it's a little bit more simple and straightforward to just do that if I can see where I'm going to be going instead of having to look at the minimap or determine it based on that. So yeah, I guess we can just go towards the B-bomb site this time around. I feel like the B-bomb site kind of lacks a lot of connectivity. I'm not sure if maybe there were some connective pathways between these areas, like between here and mid. And I'm not really sure what that would do to the map balance 100%. But we have a little flourishes here, like, this door that could add a little bit of verticality to the map, that could allow you to maybe like, walk up and take a sniper position or something that over mid specifically, which would add like essentially it would add another reason to move out over here and take B control, even if you weren't going to be doing a B finish, even if you're just trying to establish mid control. That's just like an idea off the top of my head again. I do like all of the different bits and pieces and essentially like all of the different things that you can sort of walk around and jump around. Obviously you can't like put yourself on these tiny railways, but I like the fact that there's a lot of room for like platforming and stuff. I do feel like there's just in general a lack of boost spots on this map, even in areas where it kind of is intuitive for you to think that you should be able to boost. I think, for example, like this area, I think you could just self-boost up here, but maybe not. Maybe it's not possible. And even if you could, I'm not really sure what the value would be. Now, obviously, I'm saying obviously, but I actually have not tested this. Yeah, okay, so you can boost yourself up here with a CT in theory. I assume you can't like jump up there. That would be pretty epic. And boosting over here has limited sort of viability or limited utility anyway, because the T's are going to be coming out here. But the timing is such that you're going to probably be around this position where the staircase is as a T, when the CTs are on top of the bridge or underneath the bridge or somewhere in that region. So like that's the rough timing. I haven't done a lot of due diligence there to 100% figure it out, but I think that given that that's the rough timing, there's certainly some things that stand out about this area, right? And the fact is that there's a lot of different things as a T that you can do, right? There's a lot of subconscious things, perhaps. Like you kind of subconsciously want to hug the left side of this whole area on the approach to minimize the amount of angles that you're going to be exposed to from a CT that could be holding on the back side of the overpass here. But at the same time, you have to keep in mind that the CTs, in order to reach this position to take that angle, need to take longer from CT spawn, which is like basically in the middle of the map. It's basically opposite T spawn. You can sort of see it in the map already. And I think that's a big deal because of the fact that like it shows like a pretty obvious understanding of the angles and the power that these angles afford, where if somebody's over here and they've got an angle on you, this is a very powerful angle because they can fall back. Whereas otherwise you might be able to catch them while they're crossing at a delayed timing. If like the B anchor or whatever, right, is going to come down here, and imagine I didn't just fall down, and he's going to walk across this overpass. He's very exposed to anybody who peeks him out from this angle. I do feel like maybe this gunfight could still be made more interesting on the T side, though, because it does feel like, okay, this whole region is just like, you know, brazenly open. And you want to like generally shy away from using crates everywhere, but I do wonder if like something could be done to make this a little bit more interesting, or maybe just make the overall area more interesting. Like I was just thinking about boostable spots, and it looks like this is technically out of game bounds because I can't escape. So what I would like to see happen in a weird kind of way is like if the suggestion of adding verticality was taken and this was turned into a gameplay space, maybe like an encroaching CT could boost over here and then like use that opportunity to try to kill an opper that was in there or something. I don't know. That could be something. But just in general, when you're considering the idea of like adding a bit of connectivity between the different areas, or maybe influence is a better word. Like it doesn't even necessarily need to connect back to mid from this building that I was just talking about. But I do feel like, given how barren this sort of approach is, right, there's really nothing protecting you whatsoever if you strafe out here. You are going to need a lot of utility to mask this. And I guess utility is probably the only way that you can even... if there's not a skybox. Oh, there is a skybox. So I don't even know. I don't even think you can throw a flash over to mid from this position. So yeah, utility is not even a way that you can do it. Like I can't even throw like a junk smoke grenade or anything. Well, especially if I miss them all. But yeah, I'm pretty sure they're just going to bounce off. So that kind of is disappointing. I prefer open skyboxes where possible. Obviously, closed skyboxes, as Inferno has told us, give you a certain kind of strategy as well. But even then, it's mostly like the skybox is open enough to get utility from one side of the map to the other, right? And this is a very like vertically imposing map. There's a lot in the skybox, if you will, or the sky area, you know, like overhead. And that lends to its atmosphere, I think, very well. But the fact that so much of it is not interactive and it's just there for flavor stops me from wanting to... Well, basically, it's like almost like it stops the map from really excelling at its theme and selling me on its theme. Where it's like, if you really wanted to sell that we're like bombing a metropolis or something, or whatever this area is, like a city area, right? Like you could have us be inside some of these buildings instead of it just being a situation where we are running around the buildings. And in a way, we kind of are able to go into this like subway station area over here. We see pizza. Love me some pizza. There's some of that. And yeah, this leads out into mid. So this is the mid connector from B. Not sure if this isn't too long and meandering. Mostly because like this area is very, very long, it feels like. And then you come out here and you're still not done. Like that's like the halfway point basically, right? So I don't know if maybe that could be made more compact or more condensed, or maybe it could be moved up a little bit so that it's a little bit more on the T side of territory, but then I guess it loses value for Ts to rotate through because then they have to take a longer time to get to the bomb site. So there's a lot of considerations, obviously. It's not necessarily an easy thing to figure out, but you know, I like the fact that there's that level of interconnectivity there. I just do feel like there's a missed opportunity where even if you look at the minimap, like this whole area that I'm looking at right now feels like there should be some sort of connecting pipe that bridges the gap between this very, very long B rotation that's rather windy and, sort of like a long corridor that's split up into a couple of different directions, which is what you want to do with long corridors, to be fair. But it feels like there's an opportunity right here or right here to add even if it's just influence, even if you can't actually rotate down from a sniper's nest position, like you can't jump out the window or something, right? Some way to influence that side of the map and be useful without having to take the walk of shame to mid or back to T spawn, basically. You know what I mean? And the walk of shame is only really, it's a punish for poor decision making, but it doesn't necessarily seem like you have that many decisions to make in the first place. And as a result, decisions, like basically, if you don't have a good number of bad decisions to make, right, a large number of decisions to make, then more of them are going to be bad in more situations because there's less decisions overall, if that makes any sense. It's like a probability thing, I guess. So if you consider the fact that like taking this B rotation, this long-winded path from T spawn to B, taking this route means that you have made, like, it's the only decision you can really make to go straight to B, because everything else is going through mid or going through like CT spawn, basically. So given that that's the situation, if you then want to rotate out, you only have two positions. You only have two decisions to make. You have the decision of going through the subway or going all the way back through T spawn. And if CTs even take a little bit of control of one of those areas, it forces you to take the other decision, which may be bad for other reasons, like it may take too long, or it may put you in, harm's way anyway. So those are situations where, like, because you're limiting the options, or because of the limitations on the options for the Ts, because I don't necessarily think it's like phrasing it as you the map makers are limiting them, but because the Ts are limited in their decision making, it feels really, really difficult to jump into this area and say I have a lot of agency as a T to do whatever needs to be done in a situation where I'm rotating. Like, there's a guy on B and I could try to kill him, or I could try to rotate to help my team because they're going to be doing a mid to A split or something, So anyway, I'm not really 100% sure what to actually change about this. Obviously, I had some pretty crazy ideas with verticality, because I really like verticality in CS. I think it really helps set maps and areas of maps crucially apart from one another. There's a little bit of verticality, obviously, on this bomb site and elsewhere, which I really do appreciate, and I'll get into that a little bit more. So let's talk about this bomb site, because as much as I don't necessarily have ideas for how to fix, or even whether or not it's 100% something that should be fixed, how to fix the approach to B, I do think that B itself is pretty neat. Now, there are some areas of B that could definitely be improved. Like, for whatever reason, I was not actually able to... no, I have to remember the hotkey for this. No, it's not that one. No, it's not that one. There we go. Ah, man, he's got the mirror on. How do I turn that off? Oh. There we go. So, yeah. I'm pretty sure... Oops. Well, whatever. This is sort of like a boost. So I'm pretty sure even with this, well, I'm not able to jump, so I don't really know. Hold on. What the fuck? How did two of you get here? All right, anyway. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure what's up with this area, but I cannot get boosted up in this region, and I don't know if that's intentional or what, but that would definitely be a nice welcome addition, because I do think that's an interesting maneuver. Like, basically, the B-bomb site is a retake player's dream, because there's so many different maneuvering plays you can make when you're trying to get onto the approach of basically coming from CT spawn, which is right over there. And you know what? I'll even put those other guys back over here so you can get more immersed. This is CT spawn. Check them out. So yeah, if you're in CT spawn, you can go the lower path, right? This is like the... Virgin versus Chad, like the Chad retaker versus the Virgin fallbacker, or Virgin anchor or something. I don't know what you would call that. But it basically says the Chad retaker comes in here and he's like, man, I can flash myself in, right? I can do something like this. And then that flashes like everybody who's holding from vending and everybody who's pretty much on site or whatever. So like, it's a pretty powerful flash. Obviously you got to play anti-flash in that sense. And then you can come out here with your rifle and you can like just shoot people, and that's epic. And then you can decide when to drop. Like, you can decide, I'm not going to drop. I'm just going to man mode across the way, right? And sort of like, check all my angles and see what's up. Like, there's so many things you can do as a CT retaking. And obviously that means that there's a lot of things that you can do as a T who's executing. But in theory, you're not always going to have CT control when you're executing onto the B bomb site. So it's a little bit less likely to show up there. But it's something that I really like about this bomb site is the number of strategies you have, especially as a CT rotating from the CT spawn position. And so for my money, that aspect of the bomb site is really cool. I also do appreciate, although I have never used it so far in my tests, that you can plant above and also below. So, there's something biblical about that, I guess. But I think that there's really there's a cool aspect to the fact that you can plant in multiple sort of definitions or dimensions of the bomb site, right? I'm not sure if that's ever even really been tried before, actually, in a competitive map that I've played, or even in really a custom map. I can't recall anything, so maybe somebody who's a little bit more learned in that respect might be able to point me to other examples of that, because I'm quite interested. But I really like the fact that there's essentially like 2 places to plant on the B bomb site, and they are at different height levels, which is more than just like on Mustang you can plant on a crate that's on the bomb site or whatever. Like, that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like this is completely different architecture, and I'm not sure if it maybe is not tried that often for good reason. Like, maybe it just kind of muddies the water, and maybe it would never really be used anyway, because I don't really know in what fucking world you're able to plant up here without getting destroyed. You'd have to take total site control, and I'm not really sure if it would ever make sense to plant here, given that your only access point, especially if you can't boost, your only access point into this area is through CT, or having total site control and walking past the other way, to the other bomb site and saying, nah, I'm going to go upstairs, see ya. And like, that's the only way that you could even plant up there, which is a little weird. So maybe if there was like an angle where you like, maybe you move some of these barrels like back over here, and that allowed you to self boost up to that position if you wanted to, which would be really useful in retakes or in mid rounds or whatever. And also allow you to plant up there. But I'm not really seeing a path in most, like 90% of cases, right? Like, just a rough number, obviously. But I'm imagining that most cases you'd be planting in the bottom. Like, I actually forgot that the top was even there. Also, for some reason, the orange lines keep fading out. I don't know if that's a bug or if that's intentional for some reason. Just something to keep in mind, I suppose. But, yeah. Suffice it to say, I actually quite like the fact that it's there. I just don't know if it's actually, if the map is designed well around the inclusion of that mechanic, basically. Interesting lighting. So I think that pretty much does it for B. I mean, there's a lot of cover that you could look at, right? There's a lot of firefights. I keep destroying myself, so I guess I'll turn God mode on. But yeah, I think generally speaking, when you look at all of the different things that are available to you as, a CT who's anchoring, like if you're a CT and you're anchoring and you're over here, like, you could take this sort of passive angle and fall back, and then presumably you could like throw this nade, and that would smoke off the approach, and then you can threaten, even if you don't end up going up here, you can threaten to go up towards the overpass, or you can like sort of play around it like this, which is pretty predictable, I suppose, because obviously that's the only angle that you could get that's like very, very close by to where your last known position was. So if there's an opper or something posted up on that angle, you just get destroyed. But in theory, you could like play around this. The smoke is sort of like what I'm immediately reminded of is some of the smokes that I see on Inferno A sites, where people will throw some utility for the purpose of covering off part of the angle that they're trying to isolate, and essentially they just use it as an extension of whatever cover they're playing around, and sometimes they'll even go through the smoke. And so there's a lot of cases where like I think that would be useful, and the other thing that you could do from that position is just like probably something like this, and with the right amount of precision, you would basically, there's a lot of gaps on either side there, but with the right amount of precision, you should be able to either smoke off more to the left so that you can cross safely, or more to the right, and so that you can hold barrels or whatever. And that's obviously contingent on the barrels being there at all. Obviously, I recommended moving them over there so you have better access to the upper part of the site. But there's a lot there, I think. I also think that despite the fact that the verticality is here and that that's something to be celebrated, in my opinion, there's not really a whole lot that you can do with this verticality. Like, it's pretty much just, like, there's no cover, obviously. There's no really extra geometry. You don't really get an opportunity to, like, jump on and self-boost into, like, a area over here, for example, where if, like, you move this whole thing down, this little insert down, you could do some, like, crazy jump and then, like, land up there and have, like, an elevated angle. That could be pretty cool. Obviously, potentially busted, I don't know. But it's, like, pretty vulnerable to flashing, and if they just check it, it's sort of like the Inferno B boost. I don't know why I'm thinking of Inferno so much, but that's, like, an example of the flower pot boost on Inferno. I guess B site, but there's also one on A. And the B one is just checked every now and then because it's so common. The one thing that it does let you do is jump on this, which I guess could be useful, but if you want to fall back, you basically just need to fall down. So I'm not 100% sure what that ends up looking like. Like, you can also use this to jump spot. I guess you could do that instead, which would probably be a bit safer. And if you time it right, like, this is something that doesn't make any noise because this thing is technically a ledge, which is cool. So that's like a little micro thing that was probably just like a discovery as opposed to something that was intentional, but maybe it was. We'll see. We don't know how in-depth these people are thinking about those tiny little micro mechanics. I can stand in some crates that seem rather warped. So yeah, I think the B-bomb site essentially, like, I think at this point we've figured out that it's pretty cool. And there's things about it that could be better, but it's got a really solid foundation in my opinion, and especially since it's trying something very different, I'm interested to see how iteration, if these mappers ever end up revisiting this area, how the iteration of that area might improve. And here's more teasers for some imaginary update in my head where they add a sniper's nest position or whatever, so that you can like mess around with going inside a building or whatever, and that can connect you to mid, which is what we're in now. So we'll talk about mid. I think mid's pretty interesting. There's a lot of different spots that you can position yourself in, but once again, sort of like the approach to B, without utility, you're kind of fucked in this position. Like, pretty much everywhere on, I think, a lot of engagements. The A-bomb site's a nice exception, which we'll get to. But especially looking at this so far, I'm not seeing a lot of, basically, I'm not seeing a lot of positions where you can just frag out. You essentially need utility. I don't know if this is a bad thing, but considering how limited utility usually is, where, you know, like, obviously in the competitive game mode, you can only have one smoke per player. Smokes are definitely going to be a really big part about this. Do you really want to expend smokes just to give you a little bit more cover so you can advance? You know, I'm not really sure how... Like, I think this probably is better for Ts if it's more open, because the CTs are going to need to expend more utility to isolate angles and to keep themselves in good forward positions and take map control, whereas the Ts are naturally going to just be able to like force that utility out just by existing, which is probably a consideration if you wanted to iterate on this map and get it, you know, implemented into the game at some point, or at least have it be in the running. Obviously, you could just boil it down to certain checkpoints, but I don't imagine anybody being able to hold mid from CT side without like a lot of commitment. Like, you basically need two people mid, which I guess is sort of like Cash, where you'd have like one person towards highway and the other one in Z, but the difference here is that the highway rotation is going to be very like limited. If we were to consider this highway, you know, compared to the Cash highway, like your rotation to B is very, very long compared to the Cash highway rotation from mid to A. So I don't really see that being possible. I mean, even this rotation is longer, but at least the bomb site is like right there. So you might be able to have a little bit more impact, and there's a little bit more of an angle over here that you can take, which I'll talk about a little bit later, because it's not time for that. You wait your turn. But I really like the idea that there's, you know, some stuff over here that you can mess around with, essentially, you know, in theory, with two people here. Because most of the time it's like, you know, this is an oversimplification, but a lot of the time it's like 2 to a bomb site and 1 connector, like 1 rotator. And maybe sometimes it's like 3 to a bomb site where 1's the rotator and the other 2 are on a bomb site. And so you don't really have like a mid person as much as you have like a dedicated rotation. That's something you'll see more on Overpass usually, from what I've seen. But obviously, there's a large case of like how would you actually hold this as a CT? Like, again, I think you'd have maybe 3 people over here, depending on how much utility needed to be there. But the problem there is that you don't really have that much of an opportunity to get control and space enough for 3 people to exist in this area as CTs, right? Like, even this angle is really awkward to like peek, because in order to really take an earnest firefight, you kind of have to have like in order to see the whole thing, the whole ramp from the T side, right? On CT, you essentially have to like do this maneuver, which exposes you so heavily, and the T's come out from this angle, right? Like, this is the T approach. They just come out, and much like the it's like a reverse version of the B staircase, where they come out and then there's a lot, but there's some cover over here, which is a nice, like, you know, obviously that's a big difference. But if you actually wanted to spray somebody down or to take a peek, and they were on the other side, protected by that thing, you have to expose yourself to a whole host of possible angles. They could be right here. They could be right here. You know, that they could obviously just be here, like stretched out a little bit. And obviously that means that they're exposed from the other side if somebody was to peek that, right? But this angle in particular, I think, is much less forgiving, especially since it's a left side peek, right? So there's like a lot that goes into this angle being somewhat of an issue. And I think that would be attenuated with a bit of cover over here, but I'm not sure if that would 100% fix the problem. That's just like an observation I'm making right now. Is like, it's really awkward to peek that. Again, without utility, obviously, like you can't really, I don't know how high the skyboxes are on that side, but it does look like they're something. So I'm not sure what a lineup would be for the smoking of mid in a safe manner. I don't even know if it's possible. Like maybe you could do something like this. Obviously, you'd have to try that out a few times. So you might be able to do something a little bit more aggressive. But there's got to be some way that you can smoke out mid and stop them from seeing you. Like, let's see what that looks like on their POV. Oh, yeah, so this is all right. They would have to jump spot and expose themselves in order to see if anybody was over there. So, yeah, there's some way to throw that smoke, presumably from a position of somewhat safety. And that one's going to be a little bit higher, so I don't actually know what that's going to look like. Yeah, so it seems like it's not very loosey-goosey is one problem, right? It's like a running step. So yeah, good luck trying to replicate that, right? So not 100% sure about that one, but I do like how essentially when we're sort of like looking at this bomb site, right? We're trying to, or this bomb site, this part of the map, we're trying to figure out like how the rotations are going to look like and what kind of utility would need to be deployed. We're already kind of running up on issues in that respect, and I think maybe you could probably do a safer lineup from the left side, and that would go deeper as well. Something like that would be, and obviously you'd have to go a little bit more to the right so that it smokes the center, but something like that could be really useful for keeping them at bay, basically. You want them to, like, if they take that right side map control, that is something that's allowed by the smoke, and that's something that's a little bit more advantageous of the front smoke, is that you could throw a Molotov over here. Obviously, I don't think that would work to the same degree. I should have rethrown the smoke before, but I'm pretty sure that smoke will at least partially extinguish it, right? So like maybe that would still work out because as you can see, the fire was still burning. So maybe that will work out. But this is obviously like very in the weeds. I just feel like trying to imagine what a CT team would need to do to hold mid, I'm coming up with a blank. I'm not really 100% sure how that would work out. There's so much that the T's can do. It's so open. It's a left side peek over here. Just good luck, you know what I mean? Especially since they have the B rotation advantage too. So you could be left side peeking this, or like jiggle peeking an op, and then a rifler comes out from over here. You know what I mean? Like what can you really do against that? You know, presumably you'd have somebody who hears it, but and maybe even somebody who sees it happening on the B side. But they could also just flash that guy off. So there's a lot that I think is possible from the T side of things that kind of invalidates a lot of what the CTs can even hope to do in a situation like this. So. There's a lot of vending machines in this area. All right, let's move on. Let's move to the A bomb site. I missed my jump. So the A bomb site is pretty cool as well, although I think it might be missing some things compared to the B bomb site. I'm not actually sure which one I like better. I think I do like the B bomb site better. So this is the rotation. There's a nice little vent over here that allows you to go inside the buildings for a change, and this allows you to come out of the middle. So obviously this is something that Ts might want to use. It's another passageway that they can leverage against the CTs in that position. The position itself, the access point to the vent, again, like in order to... That's 3 jumps you have to do, by the way. In order to really get there, like, again, I'm a CT. I'm running over here to try to get to that vent position. It's going to take me a lot longer than the Ts. And I have to expose myself to a lot more dangerous angles. So... like, obviously this being the dangerous angle. But if I can get through, and obviously I have to make noise doing it twice, if I can get through, I can leverage the position. And I also kind of like the idea of, I mean, this isn't really the case right now, it's very much like a linear thing, but I kind of like the idea of if you opened this area up, you could have like mini firefight areas over here. Like maybe this whole area is open, and then you extend this a little bit further out to be the same width as this, and suddenly you've got like a room in here. Maybe you could even put some cover or whatever, and it can have its own little like you know, aim duel potential. and you could actually have some space in there instead of it being like just purely for rotations and not something that you would ever really want to take firefights in. Like this feels like an extended version of Cash's B-site vent, whereas it could be its own room. It could be its own like feature of the map. Just something to keep in mind. I don't know if that's something the developers even want, but I feel like that could be something that could be really neat for the perspective of putting together some sort of, you know, vent area, like an area that actually has a little bit more justification than just a rotation. Right now, I do think that because it's a double buster, like you have to bust both sides of it, does make me feel like maybe it's a little bit more niche in terms of its application, like practicality. Could certainly help speed up rotations if CTs have taken, like, you know, say a CT has pushed out over here and found that nobody's even trying to go A, then a CT could go through mid much quicker once the execute is on B. But again, the sound cues in that result, or that he is going to create when he does that, not necessarily safest harbor, you know what I mean? Anyway, I do like that there's a bit of verticality over in this area for the perspective of the T's approaching. There's obviously this nice little area that's like meant for cover. You can sort of lurk over here really easily, and this is a powerful lurking position. I would liken it to like Mirage, A site, when you're lurking outside the CT or the T ramp. I really like that area of Mirage. I feel like it allows you to have a lot of different interesting angles. I feel like this is somewhat similar in that respect. But obviously, the approach for the CTs is a bit more pronounced because the CTs have to go through the site and then go all the way over here. And then they've got to be like, oh, is anybody over there? Oh, is anybody over here? So not 100% sure what's up with that or how that would play out. But I like the idea in theory. I also kind of like the fact that you must make this jump, which is not difficult to make. And you can even make this jump. I've done it before. So it's not like it's difficult to make, but it's something that means that you can't access it from another position unless you boost on a vending. So I don't mind that. I do feel like there's a nice little bit of like essentially where if you're already down here, you've got to potentially expose yourself if you want to get up there. You've got to expose yourself to any other rotations. There's a nice little bit of complexity there. If we talk about the bomb site itself, we can do that now, finally. Let me just go through this rotation, since I already showed the other one. I do like that there's a bit of cover over here. You can also like use this position to lurk outside any mid-rotates. I do feel like this is a nice little layer over here in this position, because it's essentially like allowing that mid-rotation, but in a way where it's not just putting you on the bomb site as the CT. It's putting you at a different angle for retakes where they might be planting or they might have just gone into post-plant scenarios. So this is the A bomb site, and it's almost, I imagine it might be a little bit overwhelming in terms of its geometry for some people. I certainly was not 100% sure what the fuck to make of it at first. Obviously, you got all these different things that you can jump around, and I don't know, this must be like built around or based on some real-world thing. It's pretty cool. I guess, you know, you can make that long jump and get onto this position. There's a lot of like elevation. It's like if you had Cache A site and the whole site had like variously sized red tanks that you could jump on or something. You know what I mean? So it's kind of cool. The bomb site extends all the way down here, but not on the other side. On the other side, you have to plant like at the foot of the stairs, basically, if that's what you want to do. Not sure how to feel about that particularly, but I do feel like it's fine to have like relatively large areas for that sort of thing to happen. When I'm thinking about this map, one of the things that really sticks out to me about the whole set of architecture is that there seems to be a lot of opportunities for you to elevate your Z a little bit. And sometimes there's opportunities to do it completely, like ridiculously, like the overpass area, right? Or that approach on A. And I say ridiculously. I mean, we've all played Engage by now. We know what ridiculous Z looks like. It's pretty epic. But, you know, for most maps, this is like pretty marked as far as a difference, right? It's pretty notable. So I would say, considering that that's the case, if we're going to look at it from the perspective of like trying to come up with some sort of solution to any particular problems for angles or whatever, it's going to be more far-reaching than in other maps where you can shift things around and improve angles or improve lighting or somehow improve firefights or contact points. But you do so without necessarily changing how the map plays or what is available for the player to move around on, basically, right? Whereas, like, if some of these end up being problems, some of these raised terraces or whatever, you're going to have to change how, like what areas can be jumped on. Also, the lack of cover and all of these things means that it's very unlikely to be useful, I guess, in most cases. But I can imagine all of the highlight clutch rounds that could come out of this. And I feel like maybe that's what it's supposed to be. Like maybe it's highlight bait or something. I like it, though. I think it's cool. I think there's a lot of different mobility options that you get when you're moving around this map, which is pretty cool. I do think that some areas should be a little bit more boost friendly, obviously, like I was talking about on the B-bomb site. The A-bomb site is just very strange, and I feel like it's going to take a lot of getting used to for most players. I think that's like the main thing that might put people off of this map is trying to figure out where the CTs are when they're taking A. Because this is an area where, like, you don't have any idea where the default CT position is. Even as a CT, you don't know where the fuck you're supposed to be. So, like, that's a position, like, should I be, like, back here? And, like, you know, I'm pretty sure, like, let's take a look at what this angle looks like. So, like, okay, we've got our T, right? Like, I can jump spot him, right? I can't really bang this, so I can do that. But I'm not really sure, like, what's going to go on there. I don't fully understand what position I would want to be in those situations. I guess it would have to be like this, so that I can fall back and take this fight, and then that would be the anchor. I don't know who else would be even on this site, though. Like, would you be over here, like, and then just fall down and take this position? Would you want to even have, like, would you want to go as far as to say that the A rotator, or whatever, the A side rotator can be in mid, he can try to take fights in mid, if he gets smoked off or he gets the call, he comes over here and he checks this position, and then if he doesn't hear anything, he jumps all the way out and does this, like, as a flank or something. I guess you could do that. Like, there are a lot of possibilities, but it's not nearly as straightforward as most maps, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. We think to all of the maps that completely changed our understanding of how rotations work, like Overpass and Vertigo, and people seem to be enjoying those maps now. So I don't necessarily think it's a horrible, you know, site or a horrible thing. I think there's a lot of depth to it, which is really cool, and something that, like, essentially it allows us to rediscover the optimal way to play. That's one of the main selling points of custom maps in the first place. So I don't mind it, but it's definitely something that's interesting, is like just the nature of the architecture being so different compared to other maps is cool. So I guess I'll leave it with that. I don't have a full understanding of what all of the issues of this map might be. And I don't fully understand. Essentially, I'm not really 100% sure what any of the fixes to any potential issues might end up being. So if you have some ideas, put them in the comments. If you think some of my ideas were goofy, you can tell me why in the comments. And if you want to recommend another map for me to take a look at in this nature, you can put that in the comments too. So many different things you could do in the comment section. So I would say check them out, and yeah, there you go. Hope this video was entertaining and useful. Bye.